And
No.
welcome back, everyone. This is episode 15 of the Movie Bros podcast. Again, we are your hosts, Duncan and Hayden.
Hello, everybody.
If you're new, welcome. If you aren't new, welcome back. If you are new, what this is two brothers who watch a movie, discuss the movie, banter and ramble about the movie, and then post it for you fine folk to listen to. And we do all kinds of stuff, new things, old things, in between things,
Animated, drama, whatever
comedy,
the hell
whatever.
World's
Yep.
Fair was.
No comment. No comment.
Speaking of
Uh,
World's Fair, we also, as the title in our description here says, we have a number of other episodes in which you can listen. You can find that in Spotify as well as listed on our social media accounts.
which are on Instagram, at least at the movie underscore bros. You can find us there. You can find us on Spotify, obviously. You can leave comments. You can rate and review and get a bell notification when we post episodes. You can interact with us any kind of way as long as we get back to you. I think let's just kind of get into it.
Absolutely. So today we are moving on from the whimsical and silly nature of Rango to the very not whimsical and very not silly nature of 1917, the World War One movie released in 2019. This is directed by Sam Mendes, also written by him. You would know him from things like
I mean,
Skyfall
it's
and lots of stuff.
Skyfall, he did Spectre, he did Jarhead, he did Revolutionary Road, he did Road to Perdition.
That's true.
Um, I think his next one he's said he's doing is a Beatles movie or something like that.
Yes, he
Um,
wants to do the same
he's done a
movie 4 different times from a different Beatles perspective, which is just
okay.
that's a very crazy concept, and I doubt it'll work.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath to be honest. Like I like a lot of his movies. He does really. It's like I have faith, but at the same time, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
You
If
would
I'm
have to be
being
like a
honest,
Beatles super fan for this to appeal to.
I mean, the Beatles are big. I mean, they are the Beatles, but still.
That's very true. Back through the information. So, music here is
Hmm.
by Thomas Newman, who might not be recognizable as a name, but you will absolutely know his music. He's done a ton of Pixar stuff, all three Toy Stories, Finding Nemo. Obviously, he's a very prolific writer. Um, Cinematography, we're actually bringing back Roger Deakins. He showed up in Rango. He is much more on point here. You'll recognize his styling and his framing a lot more here, obviously.
Way, I don't want to say better, but like at least more apparent in this than Rango,
Oh no,
which
it's
I
better.
prefer.
It's 100% better. I mean, granted, there's a huge difference in tone between the two movies, obviously, but this is a better. It is inarguably so. This stars George McKay, who we last saw in True History of the Kelly Gang. Showing up in bit roles along the road is going to be Mark Strong, Colin Firth, Andrew Scott. If that's not a name you recognize, he was Moriarty in the Sherlock show.
With
Richard
Benedict
Madden
Cumberbatch.
and Benedict Cumberbatch. Yes. That's kind of all I have down for information. Kind of like you last week when you just kind of let yourself enjoy the movie and didn't write down a whole lot. I did that this time. So,
I've got some, but yeah, there's a lot that I think is just gonna
well,
come up
I
through conversation.
so for the audience here, I have seen this before. I watched this in theaters when it was first released, saw it in IMAX, absolutely loved it. This was your first time viewing through it. So, before we barrel through either one of our paragraphs, just general, did you like it?
I did like it. Yes.
Okay. I do as well. It's very, very good.
Is it a perfect movie or my favorite movie? No.
No, no. It's
Is
very
it
good, but it is
does it have
there
a ton of rewatchability? I
having watched it twice now, yes and no. I wouldn't rewatch it every year. Like I enjoyed rewatching this after 5 years because I had forgotten a lot of the things that happened. So it was more interesting to rediscover those moments in the movie. But I wouldn't say this is like a yearly break out the box and gather around the TV.
Yeah, not at all. Like, very much I'm glad I saw it, and I will talk about it a little later, but, I really wish I saw it in a theater with good sound and good picture, but, yeah, I don't think this would be a yearly rewatch either.
No. Well, so last week I ended up doing a majority of the talking, I feel. So
Well,
why don't we
that
lead
was
off with
that
you?
was your movie. Not again,
And
not your movie, but you know what I mean.
well, no, no, no.
Um,
I agree. You're very correct there.
I mean, a lot of mine are just, like, random thoughts as you're watching it, but
Sure.
I I don't know if it's Deacons, I don't know if it's just this movie, but how many different tracking shots? I mean, that is basically the entire movie is just tracking shots, which I like. Like I said, tracking shots galore. Uh, and I think something that makes Deacons stand out is everything is framed nicely, yes, but a lot of his has to do with light and how he uses light. I can't remember where I wrote it, but I wrote somewhere. Where did I write? Oh yeah, I wrote Deacons always uses light almost as a character in itself. Like the amount of times where there's not even George McKay is on the screen. There's no one on the screen. It's just like landscape or like broken down, burned down buildings, and just like how the fires or the flashlights when they're digging out that guy who gets trapped. I mean, all of it is just how he uses light to his advantage, I think, is really what I appreciate.
Yes. What I really like in this is that, as far as camera work goes, is that there is very little scene cuts. There's lots of long, extended connecting shots where a scene may take 20 minutes to actually come to a film cut before you move on to the next one. And I think that helps it feel more like you're watching a real journey because I mean, this is a bit of a jump forward, but there's not a whole lot of like actual beginning, middle, end plot. It is very much a
This is
you
one thing.
yes, you very much follow in real time a 2-day journey, which is
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
I wrote "Where are the cuts?" question mark because I thought the same thing. I was like, yeah, there are obviously cuts, but
They are
there's
hidden
so
well.
yes, exactly. Does Colin Firth do anything else besides being in, like, period pieces or any like a British
I
military
mean,
position? I feel like he always does that kind of role.
yes and
Granted,
no.
he has done other things, it's just,
I was
like,
gonna say, I
seeing
mean,
him as, like, the
he shows up in
military
Mamma
officer.
Mia.
He does.
He shows up
He
in the
does other
Kingsman movies
things.
for better or worse.
That's what I'm saying, he's another British officer, like, I don't know, I feel like that kind of thing is very much Colin Firth.
Yes,
That's all.
I mean, he's typecast, but that's all right. I think he fills those roles fine, even for the literal 3 minutes of dialogue he shows up here.
Where was this filmed? Did you ever find out? I remember you were looking.
Oh, I don't remember. I'm sure it was filmed on location because it's Sam Mendes, and that's something he would do if he had the
Well, yes,
availability.
on location, but I'm saying where on location?
I don't know. I didn't look it up, and I don't have it written down, and I don't want the key sounds to come across in the recording. But it would not shock me if they actually filmed this in France. I'm pretty sure the scene where he's running through like the broken down monastery and they're firing
Mhm.
flares like at night. I think that's a set, but I would absolutely believe it if everything else was shot just in the French countryside somewhere.
I quickly Googled, and it looks like it's not in France, but a lot of it was filmed in the UK. No Man's Land was in Wiltshire. The British Trenches was filmed in Hertfordshire. They also filmed in Glasgow. They filmed in with that river scene where he's floating along. That was in
Oh yeah.
Teesdale. Then they also filmed the
I
broken
apologize to any and all British listeners to our mispronunciation. Uh,
pronunciation.
we,
Yes,
I mean that is ironic, but yes.
but yes. Yeah, there was the devastated French town that he's running through. Yes, that was at Shepperton Studios on sound stages. Um,
Well, because
uh,
that would be so difficult to do with multiple takes and not lose your
sure,
lighting, I feel.
sure. I mean, just looking at pictures, like if you go on Google and say where was 1917 filmed, and you just go to images, it shows like the actual location without all the camera stuff in there, and it's pretty amazing looking, even just, like, these massive, like, just fields with tiny little
Yeah,
roads that used to be, like, dug in trenches. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
What else did I
So,
got in
something
here?
I have written down here that is slightly connected. This
Mhm.
has a literal army of extras because they refuse
Oh,
to
that was my next
use
thing too.
CGI to enhance your environments or put, fake people running like there's literally an army's worth of extras in any given scene, and it really really helps sell the realism that they're very committed to here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, was I also were like, are all of these extra I mean, they had to get paid, right? Between all the
I
different
don't believe it's
shots where I mean
slave labor.
no, but, like, I'm curious, like, what amount of the budget was just extras? It's not
Oh,
like
I
they
don't
spared
know.
any expense anywhere else, but, like, I don't know. Also, this felt I think this is where we were talking earlier about this versus Rango. It feels like actual cinematography, whereas Rango feels like just the story being I don't know, this just the story being told, like, there was never a point where I was like, "Oh,
This
man, that
felt
shot was"
artistic in a way
yes,
that,
artistic, that's the right word.
Rango felt like blocking.
Mhm. That's a good way to say it. Halfway through, I was thinking, okay, I was like, "Well, this or Dunkirk?" Do you
Ooh,
have an answer?
that's a question.
Because 'Cause they're both time related.
I don't know, I'd have to think about that.
It's a tough one, right? Because I know we've referenced Saving Private Ryan, which they're all sort of time related, but, like, Dunkirk and this are extra time like, they are fast-paced.
And whereas I wouldn't compare this to Saving Private Ryan because it's 2 different wars, and
Sure.
granted, Dunkirk is also World War II, but it's more of a similar,
Mhm.
feeling to this, if you will. I
Oh, yeah,
don't
there's
you
a
know what?
lot more stress.
I will think about that, and I'll get back to you
It's a
by the
tough
end of the
one.
podcast, because that is a really good question.
You referenced this when we watched it, or at least afterwards, I think, but I mean, spoiler alert, again, this came out 4 years ago? Either way. Um,
2019, so 5.
yeah, 5 years ago, okay. Uh, the part where the main character switch, where the guy gets stabbed and dies, and it's really
Mhm.
about George McKay and not his friend. Maybe I just missed all of the promotional stuff that showed the other dude, but I never saw any of that. I
Yes.
only knew this was a, George McKay thing.
So, the other actor's name, who I didn't even remember to write down. If you recognize him, you've seen him in Game of Thrones and I believe Downton Abbey, but in all the promotional material and things like that, it was showing all of his scenes so that when that moment actually happens and he gets stabbed and he passes off his mission, if you will, to George McKay, it was more of a surprise then. I feel like you do sort of miss that if you don't watch it in theaters, unfortunately.
Like, it sucks, and I was like, "Oh, man, I wasn't overly expecting that to happen right then and there," but I did see that I don't know, even from the start, I mean, they don't they start on him sitting by that tree, and it's not the other guy. Like, yes, he's the other guy gets the mission, but it
True.
starts with him sitting by the tree.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
all this, like, heavy like, him, like, sitting there cradling, like, his friend as he dies. I was
Mhm.
joking, but I was also partly not joking. I wrote, "Men used to die in war, bro." Like, come on. It's just the stakes back I know this is obviously a movie, it's not real, but, like, that's a lot of this stuff is, I mean, pretty accurate,
I
I'm
would
sure.
say as far as war movies go, this is as real as you can probably get without
Mhm.
actually
I just
shooting people.
sure, I think of, like, the things that people are, like you and I joked about it when we were watching about, like, the PTSD of, like and, like, uh, the
Yeah,
all that kinda stuff. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this me here in my, like, sweats and t-shirt, sitting in my, like, temperature-controlled room, like, in my house
I
that's
I
safe."
did have a similar moment of, we're watching them crawl over dead, rotting bodies in,
Mhm.
uh, in No Man's Land. I'm like, "Man, I have a comfortable life."
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Because I'm like,
it's all comparative,
just
but, like, Jesus.
I don't know. The absolute, shitstorm that this guy goes through for the whole movie, made me kind of notice how easy I have it. And granted, we are both well aware that there
Sure.
are armed conflicts going on in the world right now. It's not what we mean.
No, not at all. It's just there's always I've seen it on, like, Instagram and stuff where people are like, "Oh, like, men used to go to war." Like, I'm like, "Yeah, and they also used to be way more fucked up." I'm totally fine not being, like, the manly man that goes to war. I don't give a shit. Like
Oh yeah, that bit at the end where Schofield is like running through the charging lines and there's bombs going off and
mhm.
he's being thrown around like a rag doll. Yeah, I don't want that. Like I'm fine with not having that quote unquote character building moment.
Yes. I did like the whole, referencing the character building about how he didn't really care about the medal.
I do think that was interesting that they mentioned that and how it was looked at differently between Schofield. We keep not mentioning his name. Schofield is who George McKay played, but we'll probably not use his name again
Probably not.
just because we're just gonna say George McKay. Uh,
Yes.
Schofield and then his friend who later gets stabbed, Blake. They have such conflicting ideologies about being rewarded for doing heroism and things like that, and how
Mhm.
Blake thought it was so much more important, and it would show his family about how he was a hero, and Schofield like, no man, I don't want this. It just made me feel awkward when I was at home. I don't want to be remembered for being at war.
Mhm. On the flip side of that, where it says, again, he's dying, he's like, "Tell me you know the way." It was a little heavy-handed even for, like, that situation, for me at least. I was like, "Okay.
So
Alright, dude.
I've
I
been
I get
going
it."
back and forth on that in my head. um it's heavy-handed, but it makes sense for the movie. Like, if this had shown up in something that wasn't already so serious and dramatic, I would probably have laughed. But because it's literally referencing the plot of he needs to know where he's going, I was more able to overlook that it was slightly cheesy.
Yeah, I think I'm roughly in the same place, like, yes, it makes sense, but also I was like, it's still kinda cheesy, dude."
So one of the couple things I've written down here is that everyone, even the actors, have a old world looking face and
Yes,
an
that
old
makes
world
sense.
looking face. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like I think if you were to throw other actors in there, they would have like TikTok face. It just I don't know, like they would have modern looking structure. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but everyone looked like they were from the 1920s.
Well, I'm sure costuming helps with that, certain amount of makeup. I mean, the
Sure.
point where, just makeup can do a lot of things, the right amount of dirt. I mean, it's called acting for a reason.
You heard it here first, folks. Acting is when you have dirt on you.
Yeah, you can quote me, just like we can
The
quote
more
you
dirt you have, the more you're acting.
tomato, potato, right?
Oh
Potato,
yeah.
tomato?
Oh yeah.
And, don't wait, folks, when we talk a little bit later, I think at some point we might reference, something during Treasure Planet about pumping, which we'll talk about when we get there.
Um, I am vehemently against this.
What video game did the landscape remind you of?
What video game did the landscape
Mhm,
remind me of?
mhm. Once I say it, it'll make sense, but I don't know if you'll think of it.
I don't know. Farming simulator, man. I don't know.
No, a lot of the, like, A No Man's Land, but also, like, the kinda mucky, destroyed towns near the river, all that kinda stuff.
I mean, maybe Outlast.
I was thinking Dishonored.
Oh, I mean, kind of. I When I think Dishonored, it's a little bit more like totalitarianism, which,
Sure,
granted, they're
that's the
in
whole
war.
bit.
So, but like, I don't know. When I think of more like evil looking infrastructure. I guess I don't know how else to describe it.
Sure, there's just a couple points where I was like, "Oh, I remember teleporting across this barrier or whatever."
I do I can see what you mean by the one where he's crawling across the bridge that's been downed, and then the guy
Mhm,
starts shooting
mhm.
at him. I
Yep.
can definitely see it there.
What else you got?
So, how do you feel about the baby scene that shows up? Do you think it's needed?
Um, I don't know if it's needed. I think it's a nice reprieve from just the constant, like, go, go, go stress of the rest of
Yeah,
this. Yeah, I think it's nice. I don't know if it's needed.
that's kind of what I have down as well. I have down. I'm torn on the baby scene. On the one hand, it's a nice breather from,
Mhm.
again, the literal, like, grit your teeth and hold your breath without meaning to tension that we experience the entire time. On the other hand, it really drags down and kind of doesn't do anything character wise. I don't know if it really needs to be there.
I think the part where he offers, like, the milk that he got earlier, I feel like there's at least it feels not redemption, but it feels like, oh, there's still humanity in
Eh,
all of this war and destruction.
yeah, yeah. I what I see it as is the movie giving Schofield, George McKay, whatever.
Mhm. Depth?
It well, no, no, no. It continually gives him a way out to say, no, I don't want to continue with this mission. I don't want to complete my journey. Because
Oh,
when
sure, you
he's
could stop
leaving her,
there, yeah.
she's like, oh, please stay, please help me. And he's like, no, I got to go. And then before, when he's riding around in Mark Strong's like caravan, he could have stopped there and waited and gone around with them. And then later on, when he briefly falls asleep listening to that one soldier singing in the in the woods
Yes.
after being in the river, he could have just taken a nap there. I see the woman and her child in that bombed out building as more of the
A
universe
temptation?
continually, like, testing him to see if he wants to continue.
I like that idea. I like the music.
Even if it's like me coping, I feel like
Sure.
that adds more meaning to the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that. I like the music in this, but I don't know if I could listen to just the music without the movie.
Yeah, so I mean, there are definitely moments where it breaks out and it becomes beautiful and you can
Sure.
really notice it and it's prominent, but a lot of it is just like tension building bass
Mhm.
and little bits of piano and low strings and things like that. And that works too, but it's sort of like the music in the movie Gravity, to where it's there to assist the movie. It's not there to where you want to listen to it.
The cut to black when he's been or at least you think he's been shot, when he goes up in that tower,
Mhm.
is so long, like, the where when it's black for so long because I think it's supposed to, uh, show his unconsciousness, which is on purpose, of course, but, like, that the waiting that Sam Mendes makes you do
Oh, right?
is really good. Yeah, just, little things like and it felt more artistic. It felt a little more, uh, purposeful. All the shots
Mhm.
felt purposeful.
Well, it's like, when so immediately after he leaves the woman and her baby, and he walks out and he sees this bombed out church, and it's,
Mhm.
you know, covered in flame, and then they have that one singular cross-shaped fountain in the front of it. That's a
Uh-huh.
gorgeous shot. Like, that's
Sure.
something you would frame. Like, that is so beautiful looking.
I've seen behind the scenes of that, I don't before we saw the movie for whatever reason, but it's that whole building that's on fire that's lit up be in the background, where he's, like, standing where it's just his silhouette.
Mhm.
That whole building is not a building. That whole building
I'd buy that.
was a massive like a huge, like the size of like a building, just made out of like different production lights that they
Mhm.
then edited in just a little bit of CGI to make it actually look like what it needs to be. But
Oh.
it was like
See,
this.
that's
It was
clever.
really cool.
That's clever.
Um, I found this movie really pumped up its yellows and blues,
Yes.
just color wise. I mean, um,
I found it pumped the yellows, blues, and then it really made you notice the gray.
yeah, there were points where it washed everything out to where it was just like, oh, it's not grayscale, but everything is like when the scene where he's at the end when he's running through the field with everyone. the cliff
Which
that they're all the trench that they're hiding behind, which is that's not quite stark white. It's like an off-white gray.
no, I think it's supposed to be like the chalk that's
Mm,
sometimes in ground in the Europe
sure.
in the Europes. That's
In
the
the
line I
Europe,
want to
yeah.
use. It's staying in. Um, but they've definitely gone through in post and brightened that up so you almost can't see the texture of it, but it makes
Mhm.
everything else against it stand out.
Yep. I did find that when he's in, after he's floated in the river where he almost passes out while he's holding onto that log, and then it's all
Yep.
calm, and he's just, like, wandering through the woods. Granted, maybe he's just in shock from just running for his life, basically, but I felt it was too calm. Like, I felt like he would have still been like, "I need to go," and then he just found this large group of dudes sitting listening to this guy sing, which, by the way, the guy who was singing, I actually really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Um, but I just felt like he was maybe he had finally hit the wall of like, "Oh, I have no more energy to give."
Well, I
But
think that's
it
probably
felt
what
like
they
it
were
was
trying to get across, yeah.
sure, it felt like this huge crescendo, and then instead of, like, still building to really the final of actually getting to, Mackenzie, it just kinda petered off for a little bit, which just kinda felt odd.
I wouldn't doubt that there might have been a different version of the script where he where they completely don't have the soldier singing in the woods and they have him going straight from the river to Mackenzie, and I think it would be too short.
Yeah,
And while I
I
don't want to
mean
say that I think it's there to pad out the runtime, because I think it does show him hitting his exhaustion wall, and even for a moment, he kind of sits down and takes a tiny bit of a nap. Like, I do think it helps in both respects.
sure. Um, is this based on a book or a play, or is this just from the mind of Sam Mendes slash from the conversations they had with his, like, ancestor?
So I think that this is not based on any book or play. It is fiction that draws heavily on him talking with his grandfather.
Okay, because there's I mean, generally, it didn't feel like it, but there's a couple points where I was like, "Oh, I could see this being, like, on a stage with a set."
Which pieces?
Just there's a couple parts in like, the French town where I could see him going through corridors and stuff where I'm like, "Oh, that could be a cool set piece." Um,
Yeah,
and even, like, where it just cuts away to him with the young lady and the baby, I could see that being something on stage. But no, it was just a curiosity if there was anything it was truly based on besides just grandparents.
so back to that scene where he's listening to the other soldiers sing. What I noticed the second time around is that they actually drop out all other sound coming into the scene
Mhm.
and they only
Oh,
have
yeah.
the guy singing, which
Mhm.
I didn't notice the first time around, and I think that's a really interesting choice because it makes you, you know, it almost seems like you're listening to it from Schofield's point of view, and that's all his brain can process. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it really hammered home, like, "Hey, this is the thing to pay attention to right now."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say when it's actually time for, like, shit to actually really happen at the end, when it's of course, the stills and the screenshots that everyone has seen from this where it's him with the mortars going off and the guys running behind him and everything. Like, I was trying to live write this as it was happening, like, I went from, "Man, the stark white really popping on the cliffs on the end that they're behind," and then the next, like, 2 sentences are, "God damn, the money shot." Like,
Oh yeah, where he's walking around, you got the explosions in the back of him, and he's
yes,
pushing around
yes.
soldiers. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, where he's, like, running through the field. Yeah, super good. Um The only really other thing I have written down is kind of fuck Benedict Cumberbatch. Kind of?
Kind of.
Kind
I
of.
I do like that as an idea though, and what we're
I
talking
like it.
about is
Yeah.
so previously when he meets up with
Mark Strong.
Mark Strong's character, and he gets a little bit of a lift from him when he mentions he needs to go tell General Mackenzie to call off the that morning's charge because they're going to get ambushed. He's like, make sure you have witnesses because some generals are so focused in on making sure they complete the charges and their orders as they see them, they won't listen to anyone else. And I thought that was an interesting idea that Benedict Cumberbatch's character would be so hell bent on making sure he does things the way he planned them out that he would block out orders from higher ups.
Sure, I mean, there are egos everywhere, and that includes war.
I mean, probably find them more there than other places
Yeah, that's definitely true.
eh, because we have so much experience.
Not so much.
Not so much.
That's
Um,
kinda roughly all I had, and what else do you have?
I mean,
If anything?
only one or two more things. Watching this again made me realize that it is weirdly a very plot light movie. There's very little story arc that's going on, and I feel like that has to do with the fact that they do make this a one character thing. I think if they had chosen not to kill off Blake and he was there and they could have dialogue back and forth, that may have helped it, but it would have complicated lots of stuff.
Sure, yeah. Sometimes simple is better.
In a similar fashion, when they adapted Coraline to make it a stop motion movie, in the book, the character of Wybie, who she talks to and has a whole back and forth thing, does not exist. But when they found that they were just having Coraline on her own, kind of talking to herself, it became very strange and it seemed unnatural. And so that's probably why he doesn't Schofield, I mean, that's probably why he doesn't do a whole lot of, banter to himself. He doesn't do a whole lot of talking to himself when he walks around. And then the last thing I've written down here is that in the at this point famous shot of Schofield running through the charging line and he does the pull away and you're able to see the entire field as he does
Mhm.
this, the moment that he trips and he has to get back up and continue going towards down camera is not planned, but
Yeah, I saw that, I was like, "I bet that's not on purpose."
it was not planned, but it was so expensive to
To
try and
do the
call
shot?
all the extras back and
Sure.
reset everything and reset all of your mortar explosions and all of this and that.
Mhm.
And they're like, you know what? We're gonna keep it in. It doesn't matter. And then, if anything, I think that helps that scene look more natural
Of
because it would
course.
be unbelievable if they had gone with a version where he runs through like literally 100 extras and doesn't brush up against any of them. It was absolutely a happy accident, literally.
Yeah, I feel like not just this movie, but there's a lot of times I feel like just generally in cinema where that happens and it just is actually for the best that it does.
Well, it's like in the first Indiana Jones, there's this scene where Indy is chasing the people who kidnap Marion, and he runs out
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
into this like pavilion area, and there's a big dude with a huge sword. And in the
Mhm.
movie, he's like, you know what, I don't want to do this, and he just shoots him and walks away. But what actually ended up happening on the day was that um, since they were shooting in like Jordan or something like that, Harrison Ford had food poisoning, and he's like, I feel terrible. I don't want to have to learn a sword routine. Can we just rewrite this right now on the fly and get this over as soon as possible? And it absolutely helps make that scene funnier.
Of course.
And then the very last thing I've written down here is that I wish I had a time machine so that you could go and watch this in IMAX in the same way
Oh,
that we went to
super
watch
cool.
Twisters, because
Yeah.
like it was very much a similar scenario of just having the walls shake and hearing things whiz by you and just a huge screen. Like this is critics will oftentimes when trying to get you to go watch a movie, they'll be like, "Oh, this is a movie that deserves to be seen on the biggest screen possible." This is the movie where I would think that actually applies. Like
Sure, yes, some movies that make
this
sense.
needs to be actually experienced rather than just watched. Like this is a huge spectacle and you need to take it in that same way.
Agreed. Like, I'm glad we at least saw it on, like, a bigger screen with semi-good sound, but I could definitely see, yeah, it being the way to go with an actual theater screen. and I
Yeah.
don't know if they would ever bring this back for an anniversary kind of thing.
We will have to wait till 2029 to find out.
Ugh.
You say that,
Spe-
but that is actually closer than we like to think.
yeah, I don't want to think about that either. Yeah, we're only like already halfway there. Yeah.
Yeah. You know
Well,
what? I think I
what
do
did you
have an
rate
answer
this out
for
of
you.
5? Oh, for you've got an answer for Dunkirk or 1917?
I think Dunkirk is the better movie because the main character is more of a written character and not just a vehicle by which we experience the movie. He's much more, I mean, there's lines, there are other cast members, there are more to make it a story and less of just a well shot journey.
Yeah, this does feel like more like a journey, and Dunkirk a little feels like a more fleshed out world, simply because there's different characters and different points of view that you get to see between the people on the beach, Tom Hardy and his plane, the majors that are like controlling the situation. So there's lots of different things going on. At least that gives you a little more like well-rounded view, whereas this is only George McKay's view for the most part.
Yeah. So you were about to ask me, out of
What?
five,
Yeah, including
what
half
would you
stars, of
say?
course. I give it 4.5. Like, it's not a perfect movie, but it's pretty damn close.
On a rewatch, I actually downgraded it by like half a star. I think I'm actually at 3.5 now
Three and
because
a half.
so
Not a.
when
You're
I
not. This is not a 4 out of 5.
so for me, when I originally watched this in theaters, I would have been with you at 4.5. But now that I've rewatched it and I can see the lack of a narrative, the lack of characters, the fact that there is no, you know, true
Yeah,
beginning, middle, end of the story.
there's not a
I
ton of development in
No, there's
character.
almost none. And granted, that's not what this is meant to focus on,
Sure,
but I notice it more this time around, and it kind of leaves me wanting of more script and less shots. So
that's
I
fair.
think
I
for
get that.
me, this is taking a hit as far as my ratings, because originally I definitely would have agreed with you if this is like a 4 out of 5. I'm going 3.5.
I mean, there's a lot of movies that the second or third time I watch it, my rating will go either up or down. So I can definitely see maybe reviewing this not anytime soon, but I would rewatch this in a year or two, and I'm sure I'd probably maybe feel differently.
Well, I mean, it's just like Rango, you ended up liking more of a second time you watched it.
Exactly, exactly. First time I was like, this might be like a 2 out of 5. I think second time around was like a 3.5.
Yeah. So, granted, this is only 5 years old, and I wouldn't want them to remake this because
No,
they got so much of it right the first time around. But gun to your head, if you had to do it, who would you cast?
I think this worked well because George McKay, for a lot of it, is not really a well known person. And yes, there are well known people in this, but they are in such small, minor side roles that they're almost not. I mean, I didn't even know, like, uh,
Andrew Scott?
r- well, no, I knew he was in what's Game of Thrones guy, Richard
Oh,
Madden.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know he was in this. So I think yes, the way to go, not just with this, but with a lot of bigger movies, is go with the new unknown talent. I mean, that's why so many movies like Thor, like the first Thor, or this, there's so many movies where if you go with a well-known person, yeah, you know that they can act and you know that they can bring a certain amount of audience, but they're not going to be the character. They're just to a certain degree going to be themselves. At least to the audience, we're always going to look at Robert Downey Jr. as Robert Downey Jr. or Ryan Reynolds as Ryan Reynolds. It's hard to.
Well, in some people's cases, like a Ryan Reynolds, that's all he's ever played, so that's
Well,
not
sure. No, I'm
super helpful.
saying you know what I mean, though, right?
Oh, I absolutely do, and I agree with you that even if we were like 10 years from now and we were to tackle this topic again, I don't know that I would have a different answer other than it needs to be someone that nobody knows, so he's believable as sort of nameless soldier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't think I'd change who it is, but again, in 10 years, the people who are in this, especially George McKay, I think he's still going to go on to do more and more stuff. So he's going to be probably too famous to do it. So you'd have to
Yeah.
pick someone else who's young and new and talented. Um,
Well, it's sort of the problem they're having by trying to make a new Harry Potter series over at HBO right now is that people can throw out all the big names they want. The reason those movies worked is because they got unknown child actors and then never replaced them.
well, that's why I think they're gonna have such a problem with trying to find a new Wolverine.
Yes, because I mean, even though X-Men was not Hugh Jackman's first movie, it was his first
Sure.
big movie.
Mhm.
Would you recommend 1917?
I I think I generally would, but I would be careful about A, who I recommend it to, and B, whoever I do recommend it to, I would be like, "Hey, this is what this movie is." I would not give it to, like, for example, our mother probably wouldn't be a massive fan of this.
I mean, you say that we watched it with her.
I didn't.
Well, when I first saw this in theaters, it was with mom and dad because it was around the holidays.
I'm just saying, I think obviously it's not a, like, huge general audience kinda vibe,
Yeah.
but it is a good movie, so I feel like if you like good movies, you'll like it, but it's a chicken and the egg, not chicken and the egg, it's like
It's a,
A Venn,
potato tomato situation.
it's a Venn diagram situation is what it is.
I think I'd agree. I would recommend this to people, but in a weirdly tangential way. I would recommend it to people who like westerns because it's kind of the same feel. It's a lot of wide shots, it's a lot of slow movement, it's a lot of very little dialogue from your main character sometimes. I think if you are used to that kind of a thing, you'll enjoy it. If you don't like that sort of tone, you this is probably not for you. Even if you like war movies, I think I would be hesitant.
Well, I guess again, I would prompt them with, "Have you seen Dunkirk? Okay, and what are your thoughts on that? Alright. Did you see Saving Private Ryan? Did you see?" I mean, I feel like if this is their first war movie, I would not recommend it.
What would you recommend as a first war movie, do you think?
Actually, I would probably start with something like Band of Brothers.
All of Band of Brothers.
Well, A, it's a war movie and it's realistic. B, there's enough time because it's not a movie, it's a series where you can actually really build character development, and you can really feel attached to people. Because I feel
Yeah,
like as good as this or Dunkirk or Saving Private Ryan or whatever they are, there's so much like not gruesome, but like kind of hard stuff to watch. And I feel like it negates from the actual like, oh, I'm learning about this person. Uh, which
I
I
think
think as a soft step in, you probably want to know more like human stuff
sure.
versus like bloody war stuff, if that makes any kind of sense.
I think I have 2 answers for, what's a good entry into war movies. I think I'd go Inglorious Bastards because while it's not, like, the most accurate movie in the world, clearly,
No, it's
um,
fun.
it is certainly the most fun. Like, outside of The Dirty Dozen or something like that, like, if you wanted to watch a good modern war movie
Hmm.
that is a good introduction to that genre without making it like, Schindler's List, where it's incredibly depressing pretty much from the get go with good reason. I would say Inglorious Bastards is a ton of fun, and I would say arguably my favorite Tarantino thing. Or I would say the tank movie Fury with Brad Pitt,
Theory's
because
good.
that's Fury's good, but it has a lot more. It has a wide range of characters for you to get to know and
Mhm.
see the movie through, whereas something like this or even Saving Private Ryan, like there are very little viewpoints outside of just like the camera shots that it shows you.
Sure. I've always, maybe this is just a side note, but I've always wanted, and I can't do it because I don't have the right hair for it, but I've always wanted the haircut that Brad Pitt has in Fury. I've always been a fan. Yeah, I think that's everything I kinda wanted to cover for 1917.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the end of my Word document, but You know, I guess we could ramble for a little bit, but we don't really need to. I feel like so for the people listening, we actually recorded a couple days ago, so we don't have much more to catch up on that we haven't already said within the past 72 hours.
Well, have you had a chance to watch anything? Because I have.
Well, I don't want to take it from your own podcast's,
I'll
stuff,
just
but
touch lightly on it, but
fine, fine.
I mean, it's mostly set up a like projector with a screen and a speaker in my room versus like anywhere else in the house that I live in. And I watched, or technically rewatched, When Harry Met Sally last night. And I don't know why, Hayden, you don't like this. Was it you
I
that
don't
doesn't
know
like this?
that I am fine with rom-coms, but
Are you though?
I am. I just Harry Met Sally never really, struck a chord with me in the way that it seemingly does with so many other people. I don't know what to really point to other than it just wasn't for me.
What I've found when with rewatching it is it's less about uh Harry and Sally's relationship that I actually like connect with. It's them individually, and there's lots of scenes where it's just them being Signal and being just dealing with that. And there's several scenes where it's just really pretty shots of them throughout New York, just having conversations because it's them trying to
Yeah,
be normal friends and not date each other.
yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Well,
But
yeah.
it, and there's this very specific sweater that he wears that it's it's like the it's like the better version of the sweater that Chris Evans wears in
Knives Out.
Knives Out. Yeah, that I've every time I look at it, I'm like, ooh, that's good.
I'm sure a reproduction of it is available somewhere.
Yeah, that's probably true. Otherwise, that's obviously all that I've seen in the last, yeah, like 72 hours.
So I forgot I
There's
watched I watched something yesterday.
oh
Um
yeah?
I went through another one of my
Oh
um
god.
quality questionable horror movies out of my box of 50, and I watched a movie called Metamorphosis from 1990 something or other. And it's about a doctor who is like doing like evil like DNA experiments, and he runs out of funding, so it's like, "Oh, I'm just going to experiment on myself." And
Lovely.
I'll well, it's a very tried and true plot for that kind of a thing. And it was okay. He kind of just like starts to become very old, but also he needs to like eat people and stuff. It was fun. It was silly. It delivered on what I thought it was going to do. It wasn't my favorite out of the box that I've watched so far.
Okay. Well, granted, how many are in the box?
50.
Jesus Christ.
I'm enjoying them. I'm not
Oh,
I'm not forcing you to do this.
that's fair. With that in mind, uh
I have been
I
keeping
don't know if
track in my phone, like with a thumbs up and a thumbs down next to its name in my list of, okay, did I
sure.
enjoy this? Did I not? So far, we are on like five no's and two yeses. So there are
It's
probably a
so odd
reason
to
why
me that
these
you
were out of license and were available to be put into this collection.
Hayden, if you're doing this kind of like keeping track of, just make a letterboxed. Please just make a letterboxed.
But the exact same amount of people who care about my letterbox care about my private phone lists. Nobody.
It's
I
not
don't
for
need to
Hayden,
put it online in a
it's not for
performative
other
way.
people. It's not it literally I don't care if I don't know if anyone looks at I don't think anyone looks at my letterbox. It's for me.
Then
I'm
why
just
not just
saying
make a Word document?
because this literally keeps track of like the movies, B who's in them. You can it's way more seamless that way. I'm just saying.
I guess I just don't see the use for it in it for me. I'm glad you get something out of it. I don't see the purpose.
Anywho, what should I watch tonight? Should I watch Reign of Fire, the second Sherlock Holmes, the original Batman, or Columbus, that drama? I'm
Man,
trying to
those are
save
all
the
good
other movies
options, and a
for.
few of them are ones you've actually borrowed from me.
Well, yes, I was trying to leave out the other movies that are in this stack as movies you and I might want to watch because I
Fair
would
enough, fair
wanna
enough.
save it for the podcast. So, those are the
I mean,
ones
to
that
be
I
fair,
think
I would like to rewatch Reign of Fire as well.
I didn't well, okay, didn't know that, but, I mean, we can take
Um,
turns.
I mean, I am a OG Tim Burton Batman apologist. I'm aware it has flaws. On the other hand, all of
It's
those
been a
are
long
good
time since I've seen
suggestions.
it.
Some of it has aged well, some of it has really not,
Yeah,
like,
maybe I'll
just
pop that in.
quality-wise. Um, so I guess I would say I would throw my vote behind 1989 Batman.
Okay, okay, I'll check that out.
So I do have a movie coming out, or I guess I don't have a movie coming out because 'cause I'm not on the production list, um, obviously.
You've got a movie?
I'm about to hit it big. No, there is a horror movie coming out this weekend, which I might go out to watch. It's the
Ugh.
Holly Berry led Never Let Go, being done
It
by
looks
Alexandre Aja, who I really like his version of Hills Have Eyes. So if I can find a way to see it like cheaply, maybe I'll wait to see. I like this director's other stuff, and that's usually a good sign.
it just looks like, oh, okay, Quiet Place, okay, Bird Box, okay, Don't Let Go, okay, like, it just seems like
I mean,
it's
you're right,
too
but
it's not for me.
if you are on a quest to find non-derivative horror movies, you are going to be looking for a long time. And you can view that as a positive or a negative, but the genre absolutely steals from itself all the time. There are very few horror movies that come out that don't have some sort of influence from other projects.
Well, I'm sure there's influences, but, like, those are pretty stark influences, that's all.
And maybe so, but I would also just, to play devil's advocate in its defense, that possibly could be what was chosen specifically to put in the trailers because people are already familiar with what those things are, and so they're trying to sell it on the if you like this, you'll like this kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
it could possibly be something completely different, and I'll go in and who knows. But so if that ends up happening, I'll let you know next time.
Speaking of next time, tune back in 1 week when we post the next episode, folks. We'll be talking about, um,
Treasure Planet,
Treasure Planet, from 2003 or whatever it is.
something
Uh,
like that.
yeah, something like that. Either way, this has been the Movie Bros podcast. We've been your hosts, Duncan and Hayden.
If you like this content, please feel free to give us a follow, hit that bell, and recommend us to your friends.
And you can always check us out on Instagram at the movie underscore bros. And just in case you can't get enough of us, I also have my own podcast, Dunk's Movie Corner. Again, that's on Instagram at Dunk's Movie Corner Pod, where I break down all the movies that I watch in a week at a time. It's really I talked about this in the last episode, but I find it's really just a companion episode or a companion podcast, excuse me, to this because really it's just a kind of a filler I find. But
Um,
yeah,
I don't have a podcast, but
not
if
yet.
you want to look at my artwork because I like to draw and paint in my
There you
spare
go.
time, my Instagram page, or if you want to look at that, is Hayden Scott Artwork, all one name, no spaces.
And with that, good night, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever the heck time it is you're listening to this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.